Hi and welcome to the channel. I'm Marco from Hellforge Studio, and today we're gonna take a look at Challenger's newly released album Force of Nature. I was in charge of mixing and mastering, but did some production aspects as well. In today's video I want to do something a little bit different, where I only take a look at certain elements and aspects of the mix and the overall production, where we did something different or where I had the feeling to change something about the recording, the production overall. For that purpose I chose 4 different songs, and we will take a look at quite different parts of the songs and different instruments and how my work has impacted the mix. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the song Imperial Madness. Especially the guitars have a quite interesting part in the verse. It's rather busy, and as you can tell from the screen, I did quite a bit of editing just to the verse. The rest is still intact as the performance was, and a small disclaimer up front, the guitars were played very well. So this is not because it was like badly played or even like a bad performance, bad recording or anything. This was just to make the part even more interesting, more tight, and overall give the full mix a little bit more space, because as you will hear in a minute, it's a very busy part with the vocals and the drums and the tempo of the guitars, and also the very precise rhythmic feel to the guitars. And I will show you why I edited this and how the full mix benefits from tighter guitars. Yeah, so in the full mix you will notice it's fast-paced, we have fast rhythmic feel of the bass and the drums overall, and also a very intricate pattern in the rhythmic feel of the guitars. And before I tell you why I edited, I will show you the whole thing in not edited, and I think you will be able to tell what's wrong. The very first thing that comes to mind is the guitars, of course. We edited the guitars, and usually if you are working on a specific instrument, then the most drastic change will occur in that specific instrument, of course. But yeah, just to make sure we're on the same page, the guitars here are less tight, and since it's 2 different guitar players on the left and the right side, you will start to notice not difference in the playing. They're playing the same thing, for most of the time at least, but still it sounds like they are playing something different at times. That's because sometimes the left guitar player plays a little bit up front in front of the drums, sometimes the right player plays in front of the drums, sometimes they are unisono, they have the same timing and they're very tight, but sometimes they are not. And also, depending on how hard they play, how tight their picking pattern is, you even get this subtle shift in the stereo image. There are sometimes it feels like it's more coming from the left, sometimes it's more coming from the right, and you get a really busy feeling, but in a negative way. And then, of course, the bass gets drowned more, it's less upfront, it's less distinguishable from the rest of the mix, it's blending in more, which could be something positive, but for this album I think it's not positive. We worked hard to get a very upfront and very meaty bass that cuts through the mix. That's kind of the most negative thing about it. The vocals seem to be louder now, at least to my ears, because the guitars are not that much in union. They don't form this perfect union, and therefore other elements can either get drowned more easily, just like the bass, or drown out the guitars more easily, like the vocals. And just the second that you make the guitars tight, everything falls into its own place, and then you have the loud guitars in stereo, and there's not a shift from left to right, it's just pure stereo. They have a good relationship to one another. And then the vocals come on top, but they don't mask the guitars as much because the guitars are in their specific pocket of the mix, meaning left and right, and not somewhere in the center or even moving in the stereo image. So everything gets more clear and more precise. And this just by editing the guitars to be a little bit more tight. And again, this was not done because the performance was bad or anything. This was just done to bring the mix a little bit more forward, to get the whole thing a little bit more power and more distinguishedness. Okay, so this is Recurrent Universe, which is the instrumental of the album. And instrumentals are sometimes tough to mix because, well, they're most often lacking a very important part, a very important instrument, the vocals. Sometimes during songwriting, people do think of that and they just don't write a good song without vocals. They write a song that still has something like a vocal, that resembles a vocal in style and performance. And this is the case with this song. We have a rather intricate lead guitar with two different parts, which kind of resemble something like a intro and outro, and then a chorus or a recurring theme. Also fitting with the title of the song. And I think this is very interesting, and we should have a look at how I treated the solo guitar, the lead guitar, in order to make it stand out just like a vocal. And therefore, we want to take a look at the intro and outro part first, because I think that is something, very, very descriptive of how to use a lead guitar if you don't have a vocal. Two things that I think are very, very important here. The first thing is this kind of intro lead is more in the mix. It's not above it. It's not like a solo. It's more a lead guitar. It also has more reverb, more delay, and feels very spacious and spherical and atmospherical. So this is more like a classic lead guitar, if you want to call it that. And I would agree. But the more important part is we could have doubled it. As you can see, we have the outro as well, and then I could have edited it in stereo. But instead, I opted for mono because it's more embedded in the mix that way. You have the stereo guitars, bass, and drums, which are just doing the accents. And then in the middle, there's a little bit smaller, but yet very powerful lead guitar that's there to have the listener ease into the song. And then, right at the end, there's even some ear candy, as you could hear some automated flanger, I think. Let's see. Yeah, just a little flanger on the last sliding note of the lead guitar to make it stand out more, to have it this unique character and this lead singer style. Same goes for the outro. I won't play it again. It's kind of like the similar thing, the same thing. And now we're jumping to the more interesting part, which is the kind of chorus-like lead guitar. I think it's very interesting. This is, first, it's in stereo, just to tell a different story, from being this comforting and song starting and song ending kind of feel. We now have the climax of the song, or, well, not directly the climax because it comes twice, it's more like a chorus, but a very open and wide and, well, let's call it theatrical part of the song. And therefore they want to have this very spacious, big lead guitar that takes over the role of the lead singer if it was a chorus. And then again, it's lower in volume, but we have more chorus. We have, funny enough, a stronger chorus, a wider stereo image, as you can see here, stereo chorus, and then little stereo widening. And of course, the stereo tracking for two lead guitars. there's not much more to tell you about this, but I think it's very important to see this as something different than the intro. And I think that it's even a little bit louder than the intro, even though the individual tracks are higher in volume. But yeah, I think this plays into the part. You get this very, well, above the mix kind of feeling, just as you would have it with a very stacked up chorus with the vocals. I think that's it for the lead guitar in this song. Okay, so now we're with I think the first single of the album, Victims of War. And I wanted to show you how important it is to actually have gaps in your lyrics. I know this sounds kind of weird and it's not really a production kind of thing, but I wanted to show how good songwriting actually influences the mix, and also how much I automate, how much special effects and automation is built, and also how a mix profits from vocals that are not constantly singing, where you have small breaks, some pockets for air, and something to let the full mix breathe. And I think this song has a perfect balance. I will play to you the verse and the chorus, and then afterwards I will show you some elements of it, and hopefully you can get an idea of what I'm talking about.
Victims of war, and shelter above, by what the corners see, a solemn reminder for heeding that the earth forgets the sickening grinder from which can the making ice sense. Every carcass became but a note, a piece of his mind. That heroes scorched by the descent of man, soon he departed with them.
Alright, so I really enjoyed this part of the song, or well, this recurring theme of the song, and having the first chorus and another verse chorus. Because it's really catchy and it leaves some space, so you can actually enjoy the vocal, enjoy the music behind, and have something special. Therefore, we're talking about the gaps in the music. As you can see, there's always just a full bar in between lines. You have lots of space for maybe special effects, which I built some, which we will have a look at, or even just to let the music breathe for a second and not overbear the listener with too many effects or something like this. The most important part is, I think, to kind of get a feeling for when an effect is appropriate and when not, and also when to use an effect to fill the gap, or maybe to get a feeling for when the gap is already filled enough and you're just smoothing out the vocal, which we have a great example at the end of the chorus. So yeah, let's start with that. As you can see, the vocals are doubled in stereo, and the full vocal, for the most part, is, even when it's doubled, still in mono, and I'm not doing that much of a stereo spread, which is on purpose to give the parts which are in stereo more impact. Speaking of stereo and more impact, the last line of the chorus is in stereo, and if you pay attention, you will notice that it's even getting wider with the long scream at the end. And then, instead of having this abrupt ending, I automated the reverb to give it a smooth tail into the next riff. This is something that I do all the time. When we go back to the verse, you can see we have the first line, and then the second line goes into a doubled part, and then you have a normal line again, and I bet that we have some automation at the end. Yeah, of course. You know, to keep up the image of the lines, to keep the phrasing up. So you have, as a listener, you have something to remember or to recognize. Let's have a listen to both of the endings.
One comes another, and it's pleasing routine.
Yeah, Depending on the lyrics, you can either decide to have the full stop, a break, and also it's more elegant to have the first line clean and standing for itself. And then the second line, you use the empty space to kind of roll back onto yourself to start the third line. Because as you can see, there's also in the phrasing a theme that you can see. It starts with a long scream, then gets back into a long scream on the third phrase. And in between you have something with a little bit more space, something to play around with, and this is what I did. Because there's also this very wide stereo delay on the second, on the third phrase.
Victims of war.
Which of course is the title of the track, and therefore I always feel like obligated to underline this line. Then, of course, you have the transition into the chorus, where I like to get really, really big. As you can see, we go wide in the stereo image, but also delay, reverb, and more delay. So we have a real echo that can actually transition into the chorus. Same with a stereo double. And of course, the plan here is to make it really big and exciting and kind of sucking you into the chorus, but then the chorus is again more intimate and takes its own kind of build up. Yeah, as you can see, chorus starts and it's mono, it's smaller than the verse, so the listener can actually get into the whole thing. We have changes in all the instruments, different guitar riff, double bass in the drums, and of course a different rhythmic feel to the lyrics. They're not as open, they are more rigid and rhythmic, so you actually have a lot of things to process as a listener. And to make it easier for the listener to get more into the chorus, you start small, then build up on the second part, get small again, and so on and so on. I think this is really brilliantly written from a lyric standpoint, and this is also why I wanted to show this. If you have gaps in your vocals, if you have dynamics in your vocals, and actually the singer changes voices, changes tone and timbre, you, as a mixer, I can choose what do I want to underline? What do I want to exaggerate? What's important, like the song title, for example? Or where is it important to let the riff shine so the guitar can play a little lick, or maybe the bass has a run or something like this. On the opposite hand, if you have too much or a too filled out space, then you can't really do little delay throws or little special effects because there's simply no space for that. And if something is too busy, it will sound cramped and stuffed. Of course, it depends on the music, but with this kind of music, you want this open feel and this dramatic sense of space. So everything can live in its own space, and you actually get a feeling for the vocals, for the lyrics, and the whole thing can actually translate to the listener, and you can actually grasp the emotion of the singer and the lyrics. Okay, coming to the last song that I chose for today's video. This one is interesting because it's a half acoustic kind of song and very intimate, and then a more hymn-like song with very straightforward vocals, very straightforward riffs, or I think it's even the same riff all over again, and a very straight beat. Nothing special about the second half, but this is what makes the song special, you know? You have this split song in two halves, and then also a very drastic and rigid feeling to both individual parts. And when I got the tracks, as you can see, there are literally no drums in the first half of the song, and also no distorted guitars. And it's almost like a solo thing between acoustic guitar, bass, and vocals. This can sometimes lead to a little alienation for the listener. It's this singer-songwriter thing. Sometimes it can be great, very intimate, very direct, very raw, emotional. But sometimes it can feel empty, especially if you have a longer song part. And in this case, it's almost 2 minutes. So I felt the need to do some production work on it. And I want to go through each individual instrument that I added, step by step, and show you what kind of role it fills. But first, I will mute everything and show you the blank slate that I got for mixing.
I suppose a weakening beat pulled my body into the sand. But lunacy gave us life, and death that it had sprung. At least I died in the morning when it had only begun.
Alright, this is the part where I want to shed some light on, because this is like the most interesting part. We have a changing pattern in the acoustic guitar, we have a second acoustic guitar coming in, and the whole thing picks up in tempo and momentum, and it gets more exciting. But without any drums, without any percussion or any, well, I will show it to you. This can get really stale and also not have the same impact. I will show you the same part, you know, this climax with everything that I added.
At least I died in the morning when it had only begun.
As you noticed, there are rhythm elements, there's a riser, there are cymbal swells, and also cymbal accents, but everything very soft and in the distance and very smooth, and yeah, underlining the vulnerable feel of the vocals. And I think this really helps the song move forward. As you can see, there's quite a lot happening. I think we should start with the rhythmic elements, and therefore I will show you the tambourine and the shaker. And I think it's very, very easy. It's a small, easy pattern and nothing special here, but it underlines the picking pattern of the guitars. That's it. Repeating itself over and over again, and therefore you have a really easy to understand rhythmic pattern, and it's really blending into the mix. It's not like a real drum beat, which would be way too much, or maybe real percussions, which would be way too much as well. It's very subtle, and if you think from a mixing perspective, the tonality of a tambourine and a shaker is very similar to the percussion elements of an acoustic guitar. And this is on purpose, because you don't want to tell the listener this is a new part, prepare for maybe some headbanging or distorted guitars. No, this is just the climax of the overall intimate acoustic feeling that we had before. This is just dramatizing it a little bit more and pushing it to the edge. It's important to actually help the listener ease into something like this. As you noticed, without the percussion elements, it felt a little bit empty. But if we had only the percussion elements, it would be too sudden, too surprising, and would drag you out of the sense of space that you had with the vocalist and the intimate singing and the very naked feel, the raw emotion from the intro. And therefore, I've added, I think even before that, yeah, some cymbal swells, just to ease the listener into a certain part, into elements of the mix. Like I think if you listen here, yeah, this is the start of the bass coming in. And at the same time, the vocals coming in. Through these kind of small adjustments, you make it easier for the listener to follow the structure of the song. And yeah, then same again for the rhythmic elements. I'll mute the riser for now because that's something different again. But yeah, cymbal swells and a china on the accent.
When it had only begun.
Again, underlining the vocal phrase, leaving room for the vocals to breathe, to make the listener feel there's empty space, to leave you hanging a bit, but then right at the end, just before he culminates into this big note at the end, you can start to hear the cymbal swell and everything eases you more into the rhythm that comes afterwards. And also, there's this riser. It's very low in the mix, but it still helps you to ease into the rhythm. I'll make it louder for you, but I think it's also automated. Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, it's almost like this rattlesnake kind of feeling. I think it's a shaker that was shook. And then also I think we are playing with the panning here. Yes, it moves around your head. And again, this could be way too much, but as you can see, it's very low in the mix, and therefore it's only for the feeling. I will play it to you again, and I think if you pay attention, you can actually notice this stereo wandering kind of feeling. But that's not the purpose. I don't want the listener to know what's happening. I just want to ease him into the next part and help him feel the transition from one part to another. And then, of course, it's also important to know when to stop the rhythm. And let me see. Yeah, of course, I did a stop here. And I think it's when the acoustic guitar changes back. Yeah, as you could see, we have a small accent just when the guitars get slower and less pronounced and make more of a bed. And you can already anticipate that this bed that the guitars are making is going to be filled by the vocals, but not yet, but in the near future. And to play around with this kind of anticipation of the listener, you want to add these small risers in this case to get the anticipation back on the edge, but then still don't fulfill it. And only on the second part, on the second riser, we have the start of the next verse of the vocal. But yeah, this is only possible if you actually have this structure in the lyrics, structure in the acoustic guitar and the songwriting, the arrangement. And even if you have a very sparse arrangement, you can get a lot out of it. Alright, that's it for the video today. I hope you could understand some of the parts that I wanted to explain, and of course why I wanted to explain them. If you're only mixing something, or even from a songwriting perspective, you might think like the sparse arrangement, for example, what they had at the end, is enough. You don't need to add anything. But the question I always ask myself, or I want musicians to ask themselves when songwriting, is the feeling that I had while writing the song already translating to the listener? If the answer is no, and from my experience, the answer often is no, you should ask yourself, how can I make it easier for the listener to understand the emotion that was behind the songwriting? And often you can help it with arrangement. Often you can help it with, if you think back to the guitars in the beginning of the video, with some editing even. You know, always helping to reinforce the songwriting with your decisions during production and mixing. And I think it's very important to realize that everything that you feel while playing the music, while recording the music, is not necessarily understood by the listener, it's not necessarily understood by the audience. And there are certain things and tricks and tips, just small adjustments, like a double here, a double there, some special effects here, or some editing, maybe just a cymbal swell, very small things, but that actually help to convey the vision that you had while songwriting. Alright, thank you for watching.